and welcome to Shinobi Hack. My name is Greg. We're going to be exploring the Active Directory service. We're going to look at what Active Directory, the importance of Active Directory in a network, and why it's important to administer Active Directory in your network. Active Directory is very effective. It helps protect your business credentials, applications, and confidential data from unauthorized access. Now, the foundational model of cybersecurity, the CIE triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, basically gives explanation to the importance of securing confidential data from unauthorized access and also making data and assets available for your organization. So in this demonstration, I'm going to show how to implement the Active Directory service. So first thing, we're going to install Windows Server 2012. I'm going to be using Windows 2012 for this demonstration. So I'm going to install Windows Server 2012 and then display how to configure Active Directory domain services. On this demonstration, I'm using a VMware Workstation 15.5 Pro for this demonstration. So I'm going to do a fresh installation. I already have a server here, but I'm going to display how to set up a server operating system. I have a client operating system here already from my screen. You can see I have a client OS, Windows 10. I have a server, but I'm going to run a new server setup. I already have the image on my machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference the image and then start up the installation from scratch. The first thing I do is click on my home and then create new virtual machine. Click on my next. I'm installing from an ISO file, so I'll just reference my ISO file where it's saved. So I save my ISO on my system. So I'll just impute my password. Sorry, before I do this, let me check. Okay, all set up and done. So it's my server. So I'll leave the product key. Then it's asking what version. Now this installation will be done for a small network. So data center is for large network. We have the other editions. We have standard. We have data center. We have enterprise. This demonstration, I'm going to be running a standard edition because my network is a small network setup. Standard edition, click on my next, then I will impute the name of my server sources. Then this is the location where my virtual machine file will be saved. So document virtual machine. You could change this location if you want to, but leave this default. So next, and then you specify your disk space. What virtual machine does is it's going to borrow resources from your physical machine. So I'll store this as a single file. Next, I have other setup like my RAM, so I'm going to check what RAM is allocated. Think about 2 gig. You have other things, you can customize other hardwares like you have 2 gig here. I'm going to leave this 2 gig by default and other setup. So I leave all other setup on default. So I click on finish and my installation starts. So you're going to watch out the installation. I'm going to run this from start to finish. Take notes, Active Directory is very, very important for an organization. Active Directory is important and it has a primary authentication service and it's used by majority of organizations worldwide, roughly 90% organizations. Now, Active Directory is so important because it stores critical business information on domain controllers. After server installation, I'm going to show you how to domain service. So this is the description of what I did. So this is Windows Server 2012 standard. So just next, and just follow the setup. So my setup is on. Now, what Active Directory does is stores critical business information on domain controllers, informations like user accounts, their permissions, the number of computers in your organization's networks, and other informations that are very important. We wouldn't want an instance where important information, critical business information will be accessed by unauthorized users. So what we want to do is to set up a domain. Now, the essence of the domain is to encrypt all our activities in our organization. If I want my organization to maintain a good security posture, I will do an Active Directory implementation for my organization. Active Directory, it's very difficult to penetrate resources in that domain. That's one very important of Active Directory. Many businesses don't really understand. I'm also going to show you, after implementing Active Directory, also how to back up your Active Directory service, because backing up your Active Directory service is very, very important. Your domain should be backed up on a regular basis. Why? The reason is you could experience a hazard or a power failure on your grid, or maybe other human errors that could occur. It's very important to do backup on a regular basis. So I'm going to show you also, after implementing my Active Directory domain, I'm going to show you how to back up your domain. Several reasons for backing up your Active Directory. There are things that could lead to your Active Directory becoming unavailable. The foundational model of cybersecurity, you should have data asset available at all times. Now, the reason for that is business continuity. So errors that could occur in your network are data losses. Without efficient Active Directory backup, your business is at risk of losing important Active Directory data, such as user information, permissions you configured, and also other configurations. Other errors are reputational damage. Reputational damage is delayed time in recovering resources if your Active Directory server fails. If employees can access resources they need to do their work, their productivity may decrease. And it means you violated the last part of the foundation, which says data must be available at all times. Data and asset must be available at all times. In cybersecurity, you should know that your data, you should protect your confidential data. You should also maintain the integrity of your data and assets. Integrity of your data and assets simply means your data and assets must not be tampered. So if data and asset is tampered, it means that you have violated or you've not implemented cybersecurity, because like the foundational model of cybersecurity, these are things you must look out during implementation of cybersecurity. Now, another thing you could also look at is we'll look at the tools and methods for our Active Directory backup. After installation, I'm going to show you how to use a Windows backup service for running an Active Directory backup. My installation is done. Now, before I start up the practical of installing and configuring Active Directory domain service. Active Directory is a directory service developed by Microsoft, and it's primarily used in Windows environment. Active Directory functions basically as a centralized database that stores and manages information related to network resources, which includes users, computer groups, objects. Its primary purpose is to facilitate efficient and secure management of user identities. This is a very important reason why I should deploy Active Directory in my organization. User credentials and network resources are centralized. What are the key components of Active Directory? I'm saying it before we start the installation. So the key components of Active Directory is the domain services. It provides the identity management and access management. It also provides the group policy. It also provides the security authentication and authorization. To recap this whole thing, I'll just say Active Directory provides the AAA service. The AAA is the authorization, the authentication, and accounting. Authentication have to do with you validating who you are. I am Mr. Greg. I have to state it by imputing my credential. Active Directory verifies if this person that says he is part of us is part of us. And how does Active Directory do this? Active Directory have a database that stores user credentials and information about your permissions and all you need to know about users that's saved on that in that data. So what Active Directory does is, if a user imputes his credential, Active Directory matches that credential with what it has in its database. If it matches, then an OK is sent that validates the user to be part of that network. Then the second A is authorization. Authorization is basically giving you access to resources that you're authorized to access. To me, this makes sense. Then the last A is accounting. Accounting basically saves logs of user activities, computer activities, and other activities in the network. As CIA tried the foundational cybersecurity, we have the non-repudiation. Non-repudiation basically means whatever activity you carry out in that network or in your organization must be recorded. It simply means you can't deny whatever you do, whatever activity you carry out, it's already recorded. So this gives me this feeling as a user in the network to agree or adhere to the obligation of that organization. So meaning that I will have to comply with the organization's rules and regulations and the policies set in that organization and that network. We're going to look at other rules Active Directory plays. Some of the components I mentioned is the domain service. The domain service is the foundation of Active Directory. It organizes the network resources into logical domains, allowing for centralized management of users, groups, and computers logically. Now, the next I mentioned on the key component of Active Directory is the identity and access management. Now, what does this mean? Active Directory provides a robust framework for identity and access management. It basically enables administrators to define and enforce access controls. That's the second A that talks about authorization. So meaning you can't access resources you don't have right to access. Resources like data and assets. The third is a group policy. Active Directory have a component called the group policy. Now, what's the group policy? The group policy is a powerful tool within Active Directory that allows administrators to define and enforce security settings across multiple machines. For example, I don't want users in my organization to install or softwares online, because downloading softwares is possible that users could download malwares to my organization. And I could tell users in my firm, maybe do crucial meeting, educating them on cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. All I have to do is to implement Active Directory and enforce this rule on my central base, which is Active Directory. So that's one feature or one importance of your Active Directory. So group policy is a powerful tool that enables you to set and enforce security settings across multiple domains. An example of security settings, for example, I don't want users to modify date and time. I don't want users to modify date and time on their task manager. I don't want users to access the add and remove programs. I don't want users to tweak the system. I only want users to access their systems and carry out organizational activities. Authorization is basically validating users through some mechanisms. Active Directory uses what we call the Kerberos authentication protocol to verify the identity of users. Authorization is then enforced, setting permissions for what users can do and what they can do. In that way, I would say I've controlled access in my network. Why do I need to implement Active Directory in a cybersecurity setup? One is the single sign-on. The single sign-on is SSO. Active Directory facilitates single sign-on, basically allowing users to access multiple resources with a single set of credentials. Meaning, I could access the print resource, I could access the file resource with just a single set of credentials assigned to me. The next Active Directory plays in cybersecurity is threat detection and monitoring. Threat detection, remember I talked about the AAA. The last of the AAA is accounting. Active Directory stores logs or keeps log files of activities which has to do with audits and events. So Active Directory logs and audit trails played in the network. By monitoring these logs, administrators can identify suspicious activity, such as unauthorized access attempts. For example, a user that's not authorized to access my organization and the user tries to impute multiple passwords. On my Active Directory, I could see 3 invalid login attempts, meaning if the user imputes a wrong password the first time, imputes a wrong password the second time, imputes a wrong password the third time, automatically that account will be locked out. That makes sense. So that denies the user from running further brute forcing. The user is given opportunity to keep imputing password. He can impute a password that could log him into my network. Via Active Directory, I could set a security policy of 3 invalid logon attempts, and Active Directory could also help me set a strong password for organization users, meaning I could set a password must meet complexity requirements, meaning that your password must contain a non-alphabet, an alphabet, and a number mixed with upper cases and lower cases. So that makes sense. The next role Active Directory plays in security is the endpoint security. The endpoint security, it's what the group policy management does. It enables administrators to enforce security settings to endpoint devices. Endpoint devices are the computers in the organization, and it includes configurations related to firewalls, antivirus softwares, and other critical security measures. I should protect my company security posture. And one of the best way of implementing this is to educate users not to download softwares that are not verified. The role Active Directory plays in cybersecurity is the user provisioning. Directory streamlines the onboarding and offboarding process of users. For example, a user was working in my firm and the user resigns. It's very easy to do implementation on my central location on Active Directory. All I have to do is to disable the user account. The user won't have access to my organization resources via accounts created for him. We're going to look at how to implement Active Directory in my server 2012. So the first thing I will start up is, one, I must assign a static IP address for my server. You assign static IP addresses to a server should be available 24/7 for users. If servers are assigned automatic IP addresses, clients could find it difficult to access your servers. So the first thing I'll assign a static IP address to my server. That's one. Then secondly, I will change server name to a simple and easy. Then thirdly, we have to set a server password, and this server password must meet complexity requirements. I have to carry out these three activities before I start up my Active Directory installation and deployment. So the first thing is I will check if my server has an IP address assigned to it. What do? I would right click on my notification area. So let me pull this from NAT. It's actually, let me pull this from NAT. So take note, I want to do a configuration with my server and this Windows client. So I'm going to power this Windows client. Let me network my OS, my client OS, and then I'll set up a simple network. This is how you network operating systems on a virtual machine. These servers are networked. So I have my server here, I have my client. I'm going to carry out these activities before. The first is I'll assign a static IP address to my server. So I click here and then open network and sharing center. It's very simple. So I'm going to do three things. So this is one, and this is the third. So the first is I'll assign a static IP address. So let me start from scratch. So I'll right click on my network screen on your notification area. So open network and sharing center. Then you click on change adapter, and then you right click on this adapter, IPv4. So this is where you assign IP addresses to your server. So I'm going to assign a simple IP address. So I'll do a 192.168. I'll use the 20.1. I don't have any default gateway. It's just a simple start topology setup. My DNS should be my server. So I could either use 121.1 because this server, it's going to act as my DNS server. I'm going to install DNS on this server because without DNS, Active Directory cannot work, right? So I'm going to install DNS and then I'll sign. So I'll click on OK on this. You click on close, and then to change the server default name to a simple name. So how do I achieve this? You hold your Windows key. So you hold Windows plus E for egg. So Windows key plus E. Click on your computer properties, advanced system settings. Then you specify computer name. I'm going to change this name to something simple. So what I'll do is change. So I'm going to label this Gmesh. I've not set up a domain yet, so I'll leave all this on default. So what I'm just doing right now is just the setup. So I'll click on OK. So if you observe, the old name is still on this server. Now, how do we verify this? If you do Windows R CMD, your command line, and then you type a host name, you observe that the old name is still there, meaning I have to restart. The name is going to get updated after restarting. So since I still have something else to do before I restart. So the third is the server password. The server password, I already have a password set. If you observe during installation, I set a password. Now how do I verify this? You hold a Windows key plus L to log out. So Windows L, there's a password set already for this setup. So what I have to do right now, since I'm done, I'll do a restart. Let me restart this. Let me verify it. So this is my administrator account. Take note, all this must be done on your administrator account. So I'll click on my administrator account. I'll set the password. So impute my password, and take note your password must meet complexity requirements, meaning alphabet, non-alphabet, and number. I use a simple password for this setup. If you observe, I have the P capital, I have the others on lowercase, and I have the @ which is a non-alphabet, and I have the number there. So I'll just click on this for this to be implemented. So you see the password has been changed. So I'll click on and then I wait. So on this setup, I've deployed 3 things. I changed the system name from an ambiguous name to something simple. Then secondly, I set a static IP address for my server. I set a password that meets complexity requirements. These are activities you must carry out before you do an Active Directory deployment. The next thing I have to do, if you observe, my server is still the old name. So you see, the old name is still there, but I've done changes. What I have to do right now is to restart my machine. So let's wait. I could use a simple restart code, put down R for restart. Then I do a T for the timing. Then I just do this. So I hit and enter. Now the essence of doing this is so each time you want to restart, it's going to be easy for you to just restart as an administrator. If you change this R to S, it's to shut down. So then A is to abort if you happen to restart. Then the T is the time, then the 00 is immediately restart. I'll click on OK for this system to restart. Just wait for the start. Now, why this is on, we also look at why Active Directory security is critical in cyber security. Number 1, the identity and access management. So Active Directory is like the cornerstone of user authentication and authorization. Next you have is the data protection. Active Directory protects your data from unauthorized access. That's the second reason why I want to implement Active Directory in my network. The next is preventing unauthorized changes. Like I said, we have the non-repudiation on the CIA triad, the foundational model of cybersecurity. And one of the foundational models is non-repudiation. Non-repudiation means every user must take responsibility for their action. And because of the feature Active Directory has, which is accounting, that says all logs and events are audited. Another very good reason why you must implement Active Directory in a cybersecurity setup is Active Directory serves as a single point of authentication and authorization for a network. If compromised, it becomes a significant vulnerability that attackers can exploit to gain an access to the organization's resources. And the next again is mitigating insider threats. You must first secure your internal network first, meaning that during security, you don't look at the external users first. You must do an internal security first before you extend it to external users. If your internal network is not secured, but you're looking at external users gaining access to it, I would say you've not implemented a proper technique. Then the next we'll also look at is regulatory compliance. Now, many industries and regions have some data protection regulations that actually requires organizations to implement robust security measures. The next is Active Directory helps in detecting and responding to threats, the invalid login attempts made by users. I'm done with restarting this server, so I'm going to look out if the changes I've done has been implemented. I'll do a Windows R, then I'll do a CMD command, then I'll type hostname. So as you can see, the host name has been changed from the ambiguous name to Gmesh, what I set this server to be. Then I have an IP address set. I set a 192.168.20.1.